The final audio diary entry of Moira Kim, February 1st, 2283. Written and performed by Kaitlyn Radel. So, I've decided to make this audio log for, well, just in case it doesn't work. The whole personality port thing. And it will work, because if it doesn't, I'm screwed. But knowing that there's a record of the story, of my story, helps. A little. I'll start from the beginning. The cook sent me on this mission about a year ago. She'd heard of a super rare crystal they'd gotten in a museum on Terra. Unstable, potent enough that if you breathed the same air as it, you'd get a kind of secondhand high. A single atom could be used to send somebody on a week-long bender. Supposedly, from what she'd heard. She figured she'd deconstruct it molecularly, turn it into an injectable, and we'd make buku bucks. The slime people on the planet were immune to it, but a tourist had seen it in the museum and had gone off the rails, practically passed out in a happy stupor on the floor, so they had to put the crystal in a glass case under some kind of intense security. Well, what can I say? I'm a thrill seeker, and as long as I get a cut of the stuff, I'm her girl. I should add that it's not unusual for the cook to send us on jobs. She's not really a part of our organization, but when she sniffs out a lead, she's always spot on. Once in a while, she finds a project she knows one of us might have a special interest in, so she'll tell us individually. I've always been one for the slow burn drugs, which is probably why she picked me for this one. I wanted to split the pay with as few people as possible, so I originally planned to take only one person along. Usually Sasha helps me with this sort of thing, acts as the lookout, so I went to her. Sasha's a little gentler than the rest of us in Harpy. She doesn't really use our product like me. At some point she did, but eventually she had some kind of awakening, sobered up. It's one of the things I admire most about her. She did something I can only do by... Anyway, when I went to her about this job, gave her the figures, she grabbed me by the wrists and said, "Moira, don't you see? This is our chance out of here." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You know what I mean, out of Harpy. We can start our own life together, just you and me. We can get you clean, find a nice place on the Outer Rim, start a family." I stopped her like, "I'm happy right here." I mean, seriously? We have a home, a family. She goes, "What, the dog?" I'm like, "Yeah, the dog. Fucking get clean like you only like me when I'm sober." She said, "Well, I do." And things just got hurtful from there. So anyway, she wasn't on the job. I just went by my damn self. The mission was kind of as Bondian as you can get. Cut a hole in the roof after hours, slide down on a rope. I had my entire face and body covered. It wasn't the most high security job I'd ever done, but it might have been the first time I'd stolen from somewhere I'd actually want to visit during the day. The room was littered with crystals that glittered even with all the lights turned off. Weird fusions of all different colors, grotesque purple things in wild bulbous shapes, bright white ones like needles. I could have spent hours staring at them. Thankfully, my guy wasn't hard to find. It was in the center of everything, in a big glass case. I just had to use the laser cutter and get it out. Once I got a hole cut, I peeked around the case, trying to see if there were any lasers or wires I might trip, because, let's be honest, this was too easy when I saw him. At first, I thought he was a security guard, but then I straightened up and why would a security guard be wearing a corduroy suit with patches in the elbows, some kind of plaid-ass bow tie? He was kind of hard to see in the dark, but he was just some scrawny white dude, his teeth glinting white, and he was just staring and smiling this shit-eating grin. I remember thinking I have never wanted to punch a guy in the face so much. But at the same time, my stomach curdled because there was no way he could be real. He just had this ethereal quality about him, like he was a mirage, a vision. And either I'd somehow absorbed some of the crystal through the air, or... Look, my mom sat me down at 16 and told me that my dad died from this illness. It's a degenerative nervous system disease that causes delusions, and then slowly breaks down everything until you're a ghost of what you were, driven insane and shriveled into a husk. Most people kill themselves before the disease gets bad enough for them to be wheelchair-bound or anything like that. But as far as she knew, it's carried on the Y chromosome. It's only passed down to men, so there's no possible way I could get it. So I thought, well, I probably inhaled some of the crystal. Or maybe the atmosphere on Zabua Terra is slightly toxic or something. But there was no way that man over there was real. He would have sounded the alarm, called for backup, something. I mean, what were the chances that 2 crystal thieves were in the same museum at the same time? And then I saw behind him the emergency exit sign in a different language, but my translator implants made it clear, and it was off. Whoever this guy was, he had cut the power. For whatever purpose he might have had, he didn't want anyone to know, didn't want anyone to look on security cameras and see. My throat tightened at the thought, but he wasn't even approaching me. Until he was. When he started walking, the room shrank. My hands started to shake. I snatched the crystal from the case and shoved it into my bag, flinched in an alarm that never blared. I clambered back up to the roof so quickly my palms stung. I stuck my entrance hole back where it belonged and welded it shut with my laser cutter. Then I laid flat on my back, pulled my mask off my face so I can breathe, held the crystal to my chest. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just lost. Or confused, or a little crazy. He hadn't seemed dangerous, and I mean, I'm dangerous. Skinny white guys should be running from me. I just panicked. Anyway, the sum of money from the crystal ordeal was pretty great. I offered to take Sasha on a nice dinner, but she wouldn't hear any of it. She was still pissed about the whole running away scheme, told me I could go and snort the creds for all she cared. So, I mean, I did. Typhoeus and I went on a bender in downtown Havilia, partied the night away, selling and trading and using until we were high out of our minds. I don't remember anything about that week, except for, well, the end of it. Ty and I were leaving some club on some cloudy afternoon, a girl hanging on each of us, when we passed an alleyway and I saw him. I stopped dead in my tracks. There he was, again, at the end of the alley, leaning against a rusty chain link fence in a stupid blue blazer, crumbled plastic bags rolling at his feet, still smiling that fucked up smile. I stopped Ty and said, "Hey, that's the guy." He was like, "What guy?" I'm like, "The guy from the museum." He whips around and stalks back down to the alleyway while I stand back with the girls and wait. And for a second, I think he might be about to attack the guy, but he turns back and says, "There's no guy, Moy." I said, "What do you mean there's no guy?" He kind of shrugged at me, said, I mean, I believe you that there was a guy." So I go and look down the alleyway, and sure enough, there really wasn't anyone there. I only saw him for a second, just long enough to get my heart pumping. Ty put his hand on my shoulder, sort of concerned. He said, "It's all right, you're high out of your mind. We've all seen stuff." I nodded, but here's the thing. I wasn't high. I hadn't taken a hallucinogen since, the night before. I was a little drunk, maybe a little stoned, but I wasn't seeing things. Not in that way. I told him later that day we had to cut the trip short, that I wasn't in a good place. I did some research, and I found the disease my dad had. I think. According to the online medical encyclopedia, it's called Chun-Li's rigor. Turns out it's not on the Y chromosome. Anyone can get it, no rhyme or reason, but it's especially genetic. The hallucinations start appearing around mid-20s, about my age, and they get worse and more terrifying with time. Small things, unsettling images that make your day seem off. It acts quickly, and once you've started getting the symptoms, there's no treatment. Nothing they can do. You have only a few months before you're done for. I can feel it. It's already in every cell in my body, simmering in me like poison creaking in my bones with the whisper of... I don't want to die. Is that too much to ask? There's so much I have to do, so much more life to live, parties to attend, crystals to steal, and the idea of just everything I've done being nothing, of experiencing nothing, being a void. I would give anything to avoid that, to stay alive, because especially if I'm hallucinating this random guy with his kickable smile and his beady little eyes, what if that's all I see? For all of eternity, even in death, just him and his glittering porcelain teeth watching me for what? For what? That's when I realized there has to be another option. I told Typheus about my plan to be put in an android body. I told him I'd pay him a cut of whatever I did for the rest of forever, because fuck, at least if I'm that, I'll live forever. And if they can make artificial intelligences from scratch, surely they can make them from people. Ty was excited for the challenge. Maybe too excited. I think he's had a lot of fun working on the android. At first it was we were going to wait until my nervous system started breaking down, until I couldn't hold a gun anymore, because the porting process would destroy my brain functions, render my body basically dead and useless. Sure, it's unprecedented. Sure, it's illegal. Have you ever heard of a thing that kills people that wasn't explicitly a crime? Not to mention the moral implications of being able to move a consciousness from a mind to a body. How would you ever know it's really you? I think I'm willing to take that risk. Ty told me that the technology isn't new, really, but it's not complete. Thanks to him being the tech genius that he is, though, he can perfect it. Refine it. Make it so I'll be the same person I was afterwards forever. Androids are everywhere, but human minds digitized and crammed into a motherboard. Well, he swears he can do it. He's really... he's giving me eternal life. Like some kind of god or something. It's strange watching the body you'll be in for eternity crafted in front of you. You can pick out the specifications. I want this nose, small and pointed like a fairy's, and this long, beautiful head of android white hair will look pretty badass. I want laser focus, auto-targeting eyes, and make sure they glow blue because I always thought glowing eyes were cool. Make sure the face will always look bright and beautiful and not tired. Make it look nothing like me. It's everything I wanted, really. Sasha, when I told her, I wanted to soften the blow a little. So I took her out to this cafe she likes, treated her to some coffee. Of course, hearing that your girlfriend is about to turn into a machine isn't really news that can be mediated with some mochas, so I tiptoed around it for a while until she asked me what was wrong. I explained that I was dying, that Ty was making a robot body, that I'd be the same person, or so he told me. I'd just be newer, safer. Sasha was so quiet for a minute, I thought maybe she hadn't heard me, so I repeated myself. She said, "It's always something for you, isn't it?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "The drugs, now this. You're always trying to escape yourself. Why don't you ever think you're enough?" I was like, didn't you miss the part where I'm going to die from a terminal disease? She said, "Why? Because you read it on WebMD or whatever? Couldn't you have just told me that? Why couldn't we have faced this together, worked it out together?" I said, "Faced what together? There's no cure. I would have died alone, disconnected." She said, "And now you're gonna die alone, hoping that fucking Typheus will have done a good enough job to port your entire consciousness into a robot." I said, "What's your problem with Typheus?" She was like, "Well, how much are you paying him?" I told her. She said, "That's my problem. You could have used that for..." He's using you for cash. He doesn't care what happens to you. I was like, "I asked him to do this. Why do you think I need your approval on every major life decision I make? Because you want me to move into a little cottage with you and live a happy little pastoral life? You think that would make me happy?" She got up and left. She left half a mug of coffee on the table. I felt sick, but I didn't want to chase after her because what the hell was she thinking anyway? How does she know what's best for me? If I want a cool new robot body, if I want to spend my well-earned money on that, what does it matter to her? But that's not the point of the story. Eventually, I decided that I should follow her and apologize. Maybe I couldn't get her to understand, but we could work it out. If the port didn't work, I didn't want her to think of me as this monster, the person she couldn't reconcile with. So I left the cafe and started walking up the street in the direction she went. We all live on the ship, but I thought maybe she found a park bench somewhere and sat down to, I don't know, feel sorry for herself. It's what I would have done. But I got about a block when I felt like I was being followed. You know the sensation. The back of your neck aches a little, your throat closes slightly. You start getting the feeling that you need to be glancing behind you. But I was scared too. It was the middle of the day. The sidewalk was, not jam-packed with people, but it was alive, and I didn't want to glance over my shoulder. Finally, I stopped at a crosswalk, and I just had this dread that if I were to look right then, he'd be standing right behind me with that toothy grin, his eyes. I clenched my jaw and put my hand on the holster of my gun hard underneath the coat I was wearing. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. There's nothing there, I told myself. Nothing at all. You're being paranoid. Then I turned slowly and opened my eyes. There was nobody there. I was alone at the crosswalk. But at the end of the block, standing by the door of the cafe, it was him. And the android. I knew it was crazy. The moment I saw it. I'd been working on the android with Typheus just last night. It was snug in his workshop. But there it was in some kind of dark purple uniform, her hair cropped short to her chin, shorter than I wanted it, and she stood behind the man and just glared at me with those glowing blue eyes that were, they were mine. But the look in its eyes was just cold, calculated loathing. Like it hated me more than anything in the world. The crosswalk light turned green. I crossed. I glanced behind me again, and there it was, walking behind me at a faster pace than I was comfortable with. I sped up, and so did they. That man with his pinstripe blazer, his greasy hair, the smile. Does he ever do anything other than smile? And the android, and I noticed the gun strapped to her thigh. I recognized the model. It was my gun. I broke into a sprint, dashing around other pedestrians. Hover cars squealed to a halt so they wouldn't run me over. I crossed to the other side of the street, not daring to look behind me again, and I ran and ran until there was no way they could have followed me that far, and I slumped against the brick wall of a shop. I'd managed to get myself nearly 20 blocks. That's what adrenaline does, I guess. I crouched down and covered my face with my hands, breathing into them, trying to calm myself. If the hallucinations had gotten that bad, if I were able to scare myself this badly, I didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to be in a body I couldn't trust anymore. I heard gravel crunching in front of me and then stopped. of boots. I was terrified to look up, but I did. It was mimicking me, crouched down to my level. Even its expression was an imitation of my desperate confusion, my fear, like I was looking in a mirror. I said, please, begging like a dog. For what? Its lips spread into an unmistakable smile. Those perfect teeth I had chosen specifically for myself spread in that awful smug grin, like it was pleasantly, sickly amused with what it had found. It cocked its head in something like curiosity, the way it looked at me with contempt, but also like I was a specimen, an object, like it wanted to dissect me and see what made me scream. Then it opened its mouth and said, I am nothing like you. Fear like ice trickled down my skin. I covered my face again until I heard the gravel crunching again, until she was gone. Even now, I'm like, what did it mean? If the android, if it was somehow conscious of me being ported into its body, if it was looking for some kind of fragment of itself that maybe it was once me, but lost that part of it that was me and became just machine. Of course it's impractical. Of course it is. It was the disease. I know it was. The hallucinations, the android, the man, they couldn't have been real, no matter how real it felt. I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to delude myself into believing that every improbable thing is real, no matter how much it scared me in the moment. I will not be a victim. I called Typhoeus on my way back to the ship, and I told him we're doing this today. I told him about what I saw, about how the symptoms were getting worse. I didn't have long now. I was sure of it. He told me he was pretty much done. He just needed to perfect a few things, do a couple tests on rats or whatever. He just needed one more day. Told me to get my things in order just in case. So I recorded this for you. The you who is going to be me. It feels a bit silly to record a message for myself one day into the future. So I guess if maybe one day I wanted to show this to Sasha, maybe she'd understand. Finally. I don't know. Whatever I have to do to make me feel at peace, right? Right now, I'm sitting on the roof of the ship alone, watching the sunset over the city. The dog's here, and he's got his head in my lap. I think my voice put him to sleep. I'm sober. I'm alive. And I'm scared. Part of me is scared that it won't work. Part of me is scared that it will work, but only partially. That I'll be trapped deep in the mental recesses of some body that grows to resent me. Everything I've ever done. But that's nothing I can dwell on. Not now, when I'm so close to... I can't explain every action, every choice. But I can explain this one. And hopefully, that's enough.